Okay, so here is a common piece of negotiation advice that you should never follow. Don't get emotional, just stay rational, focus on the facts. Gotta tell you, as a negotiation expert, this has to be among the most annoying and most wrong-headed advice I ever hear. So here's an exercise for you. I want you to think about a time you had a strong emotion in some negotiation. It can be any negotiation. Maybe it was over a salary at work. Maybe it was you were in committee and trying to get your colleagues to agree to something. Maybe it's with your kids or your spouse or your in-laws. Just any time you had a strong emotion.
Okay, I'm thinking, all right? Let me think. Okay.
And I want you to think about what that emotion is. And in the comment section, just write down the emotion. I don't need to hear the whole story, though I'm sure it's interesting. I also want you to write in the comment section, what impact did that emotion have on the negotiation itself? Feel free to pause this video to complete this exercise. So I'd venture to guess that many of you, when thinking about the impact of the emotions on the negotiation, said things like, it made the negotiation worse, or it distracted us, or it made me shut down, or it made me or the other person walk out. And to the degree that these answers are true, it just identifies something that I think is obvious and needs to be stated, which is emotions are always present in a negotiation, and they always impact the way negotiations go. And so the notion that we can somehow just remain rational or stick to the facts really doesn't make sense. I have to tell you, I have spent a quarter of a century teaching, writing, coaching, and conducting negotiations. I have never gone into any workplace, any school, any hospital, any business, any government building where on the way in there was a little box that said, please deposit your feelings here for pickup later this afternoon.
I wish we could do that.
That just doesn't happen. And so the question isn't, am I going to have emotions in this negotiation? The question rather is, are the emotions going to have me? And so today, we're going to talk about both when and how to name emotions in a negotiation. I'm Bob Bordone. I'm a senior fellow at Harvard Law School. I'm the founder and former director of Harvard Law School's Negotiation and Mediation Clinical Program, and I'm the founder and principal of the Cambridge Negotiation Institute. So as we continue, let's distinguish the naming of emotions at two levels. First is naming them internally to yourself, and second is naming and discussing the emotions verbally outside to the other side. So on the first point, when it comes to naming emotions to yourself, my advice here is a rare one because I hardly ever say always and never, but I am going to say always this time. It is always worth naming and noting the emotions you're feeling. There is a treasure trove of research that supports what Matt Lieberman at UCLA calls affective labeling. The power in recognizing and naming emotion in order to tame it. And doing this work actually helps you with cognitive decision making. So becoming aware of and acknowledging and naming emotions to ourselves is always good in negotiation. It is not always the case, however, that we should name and discuss the emotions in the room. First, let me share some of the times when you should not share emotions in the room. First, if your purpose is to somehow make the other side fear you. Secondly, and relatedly, to make the other side feel sorry for you. Third is to vent. Now, venting can be very powerful and important, but that is something maybe you ought to do with like your therapist or your best friend or your spouse, not with your negotiation counterpart. And fourth, you do not want to share emotions for the purpose of tricking them. In fact, there has been research that shows that when human beings fake and demonstrate anger, in negotiations it actually backfires. That's because human beings are actually really good at detecting whether an emotion is genuine or not. Having said that, the same research shows that when anger is displayed and is sincere, it actually can cause some real concession making.
Really? Really, really.
Okay, so these are reasons not to share emotions. What are some of the times or reasons when naming an emotion might actually be a good idea in the negotiation? Sometimes you can't get the substantive work done until you name and discuss and work through the emotions in the room. I see this probably most powerfully, although not exclusively, when I'm involved in family mediations. We might be figuring out what to do with the matriarch's summer estate. And I can see that we're getting nowhere, and nowhere on issues that, while complicated, shouldn't be impossible to resolve. And in a short amount of time, what I realized that what's blocking is very strong negative emotions, sometimes shared by everyone in the room, sometimes shared by just some of the people in the room, but they're not getting discussed or acknowledged explicitly. Sometimes the emotions, frankly, are very vulnerable emotions or emotions of grieving and great sadness. And in times like that, what I realize is getting the people to own and share and express the emotion actually does a lot of the work to getting us to be more efficient on resolving the substantive issues. A second reason to share emotions in negotiation is that sometimes it helps address issues of morale or hurt. That is to say that sometimes the thing that is at the heart of the matter are the emotions themselves. The truth of the matter is we live in a culture and a society that often tells us that if we have emotions, we are perhaps unhinged, perhaps not logical, that perhaps we should feel guilty or wrong or weak. Truth of the matter is, though, right, that sometimes hurt feelings or feelings of jealousy or feelings of worry or frankly feelings of love are at the heart of what needs to get discussed or worked through. And so those are times when I want to talk about that. Some years ago, I was working with a teaching team. We were working in a very intensive situation over the course of a week. We were meeting every morning at 6:30 a.m. And on Thursday morning, I just felt like we were not making any progress on any of the issues. And it was tempting to just plow through because we were tired and we had only one more day.
Any updates?
So that exercise, which took about 15 minutes, might have felt like a waste of time, but the truth of the matter is it was a huge efficiency move. Once we did that, we were really ready to tackle the issues we had to finish up on. Okay, so now that we've talked about when to share, when not to share, let me give you 4 tips for how to express emotions once you've decided it's worth doing. First, I want to say that you do not need to be emotional in order to share emotions. So when I say share emotions, I don't mean crying, screaming, yelling, banging tables. There are ways to share emotions without being emotional. You can say, I'm feeling really angry, really upset, and really hurt without losing it. So distinguish those. Second, when you're sharing emotions, I want to encourage you to express the full range of your emotions. Oftentimes in a negotiation, we would say that loud emotions, emotions like anger and frustration, cover over softer emotions like maybe emotions of hurt or confusion or loneliness. It is much more effective to share the full range of the emotions than just the cover emotion. So embrace emotional complexity. And why does that matter? Well, if I'm really frustrated with you and I say, when you did that, it makes me angry, that's probably a skillful way to say it. But if I say, when you do that, it makes me angry and also feel sad and confused and a bit lost, A, that's more accurate. B, it probably lands with you in a different way, in a way that you're more likely to actually be able to receive. Third, when you share the emotion, also share your reasoning. Now, I want to be really explicit about this. Your reasoning is different from a justification. You do not need to justify your emotions. Your emotions are just that. But it is helpful to share the reasoning or explanation because sometimes the other person is left wondering, where is this coming from? So let me give you an example on the difference between sharing reasoning from justification. Let's imagine you've been working on a project for many months and you feel like you haven't been making much progress. Sharing with the team something like, I have to tell you I've been feeling exhausted and frustrated and worried here because I feel like we've been working on this for a really long time and our progress has been so infinitesimal. That is something that is worth sharing. You are explaining the reason why you are having these feelings. Distinguish it from this. I have to tell you I'm feeling frustrated and sad and nervous, and I really think it's appropriate and just that I'm feeling that way. The last part is kind of irrelevant. It doesn't really matter whether you're justified, and it sounds defensive to evaluate the feelings. So you don't need to share the justification. You feel what you feel. Sometimes you might be saying, yeah, I just feel really sad, and it's because things have not panned out the way I would have liked. That's enough. You don't need to say, and I think it's appropriate, or and I think it's fair. Last piece of advice is when you are sharing emotions, make sure you give the other person some space to react. Most of us, even people like me who teach about this stuff, we're still not used to emotions being talked about explicitly in a negotiation. And so if you're going to do that, it's probably uncharted terrain for the other person. And so allowing some space for them to react, to say something like, how are you feeling about that? What's your reaction? What are your thoughts? It's just being respectful of them. And my experience is often when you do that, you'll get some kind of reciprocation along the lines of emotions as well. So giving them the space to share emotions is also just another way to acknowledge our common humanity. And in the context of a negotiation, it's a way to remind the other person that we're all here to try to find some mutual gains outcome. Now, as you think about whether to share emotions, let me just say that the answer to that question may also depend at least a bit on issues of culture, on your relationship with the other party, on their ability to handle emotions. And so considering all of this might help you to calibrate both the how and the when to do it. Remember also that how you're feeling is not subject to evaluation from the other party. So, to continue your learning about how to improve a negotiation, watch this next video, How to Improve My Negotiation Skills. And I know I will feel happy and seen if you subscribe to my channel, like this video, and ring the bell. So thanks for doing that, and see you next time. Okay, it's not difficult to keep watching. Click, click.